At first, NASA called 3I/Atlas a rock from another star. Then it answered. The reply wasn't words, but a pulse, soft and steady, that climbed into our radios and matched our heartbeats. Every screen in the room blinked in the same rhythm. Chest straps synced, breaths synced. For 3 long beats, the pulse slowed, slower, until the room felt like an elevator dropping through the floor. Coffee cups trembled. Someone whispered, "Cut it." But the signal didn't care. It kept coming through muted speakers and dead cables humming in the metal under our feet. When the static cleared, the screens drew a clean line map of our solar system. Dots for the planets, a pale ring for the sun, and Earth marked in white. A thin black circle slid around Earth like a target. No sound, no code, just the circle, tightening, slower, until it wasn't a ring anymore. It was an eye. The letters appeared under it in perfect English, then in every language at once. "We count you." The eye blinked once, long, patient, like something far older than light had finished taking attendance. That was 6 months ago at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. I'm Dr. Jake Torino, and I was the lead systems analyst who first decoded that transmission. What they don't tell you in the official reports is that 3 technicians quit that same day. 2 more requested transfers to different departments. The guy sitting next to me, Tommy Brennan, started drinking again after being sober for 8 years. But I stayed, partly because my mortgage won't pay itself, partly because my ex-wife would call me a coward if I ran, mostly because something about that eye felt familiar, like it had been watching me long before we ever pointed our dishes at the stars. The brass classified everything above my clearance level within hours. New protocols, new security badges, new lies to tell our families about what we were really doing in Building 28. They moved us to a sub-basement I'd never seen before, behind 3 different keycard locks and a biometric scanner that read the veins in your wrist. Dr. Vincent Ashford ran the new project. Tall guy, maybe 50, with the kind of calm that comes from seeing too much classified shit. He had this way of speaking that made you feel like you were already behind on information you'd never been given. "Gentlemen," he said on that first morning, standing in front of a wall of monitors showing nothing but static, "what you experienced was first contact. What happens next depends entirely on whether we can figure out what it wants before it decides to take it." The coffee machine down here makes this grinding noise, like metal teeth chewing. The fluorescent lights buzz at a frequency that makes your skull itch. And every morning when I swipe my badge, I wonder if today's the day that I decides to blink again. The first thing you notice about Sub-Level 7 is that it doesn't exist on any building schematics. Dr. Ashford made that clear during our orientation. If anyone asks, you work in communications. If they press, you calibrate satellite dishes. If they keep asking, you find me. The space itself felt wrong from day one. Long corridor with offices branching off like ribs, but the doors were spaced too far apart. Room 726 sat directly across from room 730. When I asked Tommy about the missing rooms, he just shrugged. Probably storage or something. You know how government construction works. My new office had a window that looked out onto the parking garage, which was impossible since we were 7 floors underground. The glass reflected my face back at me, but sometimes, just for a split second, the reflection seemed to lag behind my movements. I mentioned it to the maintenance guy, a quiet kid named Luis Vega who'd been working the basement levels for 3 years. "Yeah, the mirrors down here do that," he said, not looking up from his toolbox. "Something about the electromagnetic fields messing with the silver backing. At least that's what they told me when I started. The guys who worked here before you showed up, packed up real fast about a week ago, left half their stuff behind." He pulled out a screwdriver with a handle worn smooth from years of use. "Found this in one of the desks, engraved with initials, DMK. Know anyone with those initials?" I didn't, but something about those letters made my stomach clench. Tommy Brennan turned out to be my closest thing to an ally down here. We'd worked together on satellite calibration projects for 2 years before the 3I/Atlas incident, and he had a talent for finding humor in bureaucratic bullshit that kept me sane during the long hours. He was also the only other person in the building who'd been in the room when that eye first appeared on our screens. "You ever think about what it meant?" he asked on our third day, pulling up a chair next to my workstation. The monitors around us displayed endless streams of radio telescope data from the Arecibo Observatory Replacement Facility in Puerto Rico. "Which part?" "We count you, not we see you or we know you. Count, like it was taking inventory." He lowered his voice. "What if we're not the first?" Before I could answer, my terminal chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender field showed only a timestamp, 14:23:07 GMT. The message itself was a single line of text. "Jake, check frequency 1420.405751 MHz. Listen for the gaps. D." "Who's D?" Tommy asked, reading over my shoulder. "I have no fucking clue." The hydrogen line at 1420 MHz was one of the most important frequencies in radio astronomy, the natural emission frequency of neutral hydrogen atoms. It was also the frequency SETI researchers monitored most carefully, thinking that any intelligent civilization would know to broadcast on a frequency that occurred naturally throughout the universe. I pulled up the frequency data from our Puerto Rico feeds. At first, everything looked normal, the expected background radiation, some solar interference, the usual cosmic noise. But then I started looking at the gaps, moments where the signal went completely silent for exactly 1.618 seconds at regular intervals. "That's the golden ratio," I whispered. "What?" 1.618, the gaps are timed to the golden ratio. That's not natural interference. That's mathematical. Tommy leaned closer to the screen. "How long has this been going on?" I scrolled back through the data logs. The pattern stretched back weeks, long before our first contact event. "Jesus Christ, Tommy. It's been talking to us for months and we never noticed." That's when the lights went out. Not a gradual dimming or a flicker, just complete darkness, like someone had thrown a switch. The emergency lighting should have kicked in within seconds, but we sat in perfect black silence for what felt like minutes. I could hear Tommy breathing next to me, could smell the institutional coffee burning in the break room down the hall. When the power came back, every monitor in the room displayed the same image. A star chart showing our local stellar neighborhood. A thin line connected our sun to another star system 47.5 light-years away. At the far end of the line, a small dot pulsed once, twice, then disappeared. "That's not possible," Tommy said. "The nearest star that could support life is over 4 light-years away." But I was staring at something else entirely. In the corner of each screen, barely visible against the black background, were 3 letters. DMK. The same initials engraved on the screwdriver Luis had found. Dr. Ashford's voice crackled over the intercom. "All staff report to conference room A immediately." No exceptions. As we stood to leave, I noticed something that made the hair on my neck stand up. The reflection in my window, the one that had been lagging behind my movements, was now moving independently. It was still my face, still my body, but it was looking directly at me while I faced away from the glass. When I turned to look, the reflection turned too, perfectly synchronized again. "Tommy," I said, "we need to talk about what we're really dealing with here." He was already walking toward the door, but he paused and looked back. "Whatever it is, Jake, I don't think we're equipped to handle it." The conference room was 3 doors down, but as we walked, I counted our footsteps. 27 steps. I'd made this walk dozens of times before, and it had never been more than 15. Conference room. A turned out to be conference room C when we arrived. Same hallway, same door number, but the nameplate had changed. Tommy noticed it first. "I swear to God, Jake, this was room A 15 minutes ago." I couldn't argue. The building seemed to be reshuffling itself when we weren't paying attention. Inside, 8 of us sat around a table that should have seated 12, but somehow felt crowded. Dr. Ashford stood at the head, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, a projection screen showed what looked like a medical scan, but of what, I couldn't tell. "Gentlemen," Ashford began, "what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels. Some of you may find it disturbing." The scan rotated slowly. It resembled a brain, but the neural pathways formed geometric patterns that hurt to focus on directly. Fractals within fractals, each level more complex than the last. This is a cognitive map of Dr. Daniel Caney, former project lead on the 3I/Atlas investigation. We built this from his final neural scans before his departure from the project. Tommy shifted in his seat. What kind of departure? Dr. Caney began exhibiting unusual behavior 3 weeks after first contact. He claimed he could hear the signal even when all equipment was powered down. He started speaking in mathematical sequences, and he insisted that 3I/Atlas wasn't approaching our solar system, it was already here. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lighting. I thought about the screwdriver with DMK engraved on the handle, the initials that had appeared on our screens. "Where is Dr. Kane now?" asked Rodriguez, one of the newer analysts. Ashford's pause stretched too long. Dr. Caney volunteered for an experimental procedure designed to block the signal's effects on human neural tissue. The procedure was partially successful. Meaning Dr. Caney is still with us, in a sense, but he's no longer entirely Dr. Caney. The projection changed to show security footage from what looked like a medical facility. A man sat in a white room, perfectly still, staring at a wall. Every few seconds, he would tap the table in front of him. 3 short taps, 2 long, 1 short. Over and over. "That's Morse code," I said. 3 dots, 2 dashes, 1 dot, the letter V repeated. "Very good, Dr. Torino. He's been tapping that pattern for 6 weeks, 17 hours a day. The only time he stops is when he sleeps, and even then, his fingers continue the motion." Tommy leaned forward. "What does V mean?" "We don't know, but yesterday something changed." Ashford clicked to the next slide. At exactly 14:23 GMT, Dr. Kane stopped tapping. He looked directly at the security camera, the first time he'd acknowledged anything in his environment since the procedure, and spoke one word: vector. Vector, a mathematical term for direction and magnitude. In space, it meant a path from one point to another. "Sir," I said, "that's the exact time I received the message telling me to monitor the hydrogen line." Ashford nodded grimly. "We know." The message originated from Dr. Kane's room, despite the fact that he has no access to any communication devices. The implications sank in slowly. If Caney could somehow transmit messages while locked in a secured medical facility, then the signal from 3I/Atlas wasn't just communication, it was infiltration. "There's more," Ashford continued. "Show him the Puerto Rico data, Dr. Martinez." A younger man I didn't recognize pulled up a tablet. Dr. Luis Martinez had the nervous energy of someone who'd been staring at screens too long. "The gaps in the hydrogen line signal that you identified, they're not random. When we plot them geographically, they form a pattern." The screen showed a map of Earth with thousands of tiny dots scattered across the surface. At first, it looked chaotic. Then Martinez adjusted the scale, and the dots connected into lines. The lines formed shapes, the shapes formed a grid. "It's mapping us," I whispered. "Every transmission gap corresponds to a populated area. Cities, towns, military installations." "Not just mapping," Martinez said. "Counting. The duration of each gap correlates precisely with population density. It's conducting a census." Tommy stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air." "Sit down, Dr. Brennan," Ashford said firmly. "We're not finished." "The hell we're not. You're telling us that some rock from outer space is cataloguing every person on Earth, and you want us to just sit here and take notes. That rock, as you call it, is approximately 15 kilometers in diameter and composed of materials that don't exist in our periodic table. It's been accelerating toward Earth for 6 months, but according to our latest calculations, it should have arrived 3 weeks ago." The room went quiet again. "Where is it now?" "That's the problem. We don't know. It disappeared from all tracking systems last Monday. No debris field, no course correction, no gravitational signature. One day it was there, the next it was gone." Rodriguez raised his hand. "Maybe it changed course." went around us? Impossible, the trajectory was too precise, and there's no energy source capable of generating that kind of course correction. Ashford paused, looking each of us in the eye. There's only one explanation that fits the data. I already knew what he was going to say, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that terrified me. 3I/Atlas isn't missing, it's here. Somewhere in our solar system, it's gone dark and silent. And if Dr. Kane is right, it's been influencing us longer than we realized. The lights flickered, just once, but long enough for me to see something move in the corner of the room. When the illumination steadied, there was nothing there. But on the projection screen, the star map from earlier had reappeared. The line connecting our sun to that distant system was pulsing now, and new lines were spreading out from it like a spider's web. "Gentlemen," Ashford said, "I need to ask you a direct question, and I need honest answers. Have any of you experienced unusual dreams since the first contact event? Recurring nightmares? The sensation of being watched?" Every hand in the room went up except mine. I wasn't dreaming about being watched. I was being watched. The reflection in my office window, the way shadows seemed to move independently, the feeling that something was always just outside my peripheral vision. But I kept my hand down because I had a terrible suspicion that admitting it would put me in a white room next to Dr. Kane, tapping out Morse code until whatever was left of my mind finally snapped. "Dr. Torino," Ashford was looking at me directly. "No unusual experiences?" "No, sir. Just the standard stress of working on classified projects." He studied my face for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he knew I was lying. "Very well. You're all dismissed except for Dr. Torino. I need to speak with you privately." As the others filed out, Tommy caught my arm. "Whatever he wants to talk about, be careful. Something's not right about any of this." When the room cleared, Ashford sat down across from me. "Dr. Caney specifically requested you for this project. Do you know why?" "I've never met Dr. Kane in my life." "Are you sure? Because according to his medical records, he's been asking about you for 3 months. 3 months before the first contact event." The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. "That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible anymore, Jake. The question is, what does it want with you?" The walk back to my office felt like swimming through thick air. Ashford's words echoed in my head. "What does it want with you?" The fluorescent lights hummed their electrical song, but underneath I swore I could hear something else, a rhythm that matched my heartbeat but ran slightly behind like an echo of my pulse. Tommy was waiting by my desk, smoking a cigarette despite the no-smoking policy. His hands shook as he brought it to his lips. "Since when do you smoke?" I asked. "Since about an hour ago. Found a pack in one of the abandoned desks. Marlboro Reds, barely touched." He took a long drag. "Jake, I've been thinking about what you said back there." "What part?" "The part where you lied to Ashford about not having unusual experiences." I sat down heavily in my chair. The reflection in the window showed me slumping forward, but my actual posture was straight. The lag was getting worse. "How do you know I was lying?" "Because I've been watching you for 3 days. You flinch at shadows that aren't there. You check corners before entering rooms. And yesterday, I saw you having a full conversation with your reflection. I wasn't... You were asking it questions, Jake. And it was answering. Different mouth movements, different expressions, like it was somebody else wearing your face." The cigarette smoke drifted between us, creating patterns that reminded me of the neural scans of Dr. Kane's brain. Fractals within fractals, each level more complex than the last. "Tommy, we need to get out of here." "Can't. Building's on lockdown as of 20 minutes ago. Security badge readers are offline, elevator requires special authorization, and the stairwells are sealed for maintenance." He stubbed out the cigarette on my desk, leaving a small burn mark. "We're trapped down here with whatever they're really studying." That's when the screaming started. It came from somewhere deeper in the building, not the floors above us, but below. Sublevel 8, which officially didn't exist. A sound like metal being twisted combined with something organic and wet. The lights went out again, but this time the emergency illumination kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red. Through the crimson haze, I could see Luis Vega running down the hallway, his maintenance uniform torn and stained with something dark. "The elevator!" he shouted as he reached my office. "Don't go near the fucking elevator!" What happened? Tommy stood up, grabbing Luis by the shoulders. Dr. Martinez went down to sub-level 8 to check the server room. The elevator came back up, but... Luis gulped air like a man drowning. The doors opened and there was nobody inside. Just his clothes, folded neat and tidy on the floor, and his teeth. His teeth? All of them, arranged in a perfect circle like they'd been pulled out one by one and placed there on purpose. The screaming stopped abruptly, replaced by a sound worse than silence, a wet, rhythmic tapping that echoed through the ventilation system. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, pause, tap. Morse code. The letter V repeated endlessly. "Jesus Christ," Tommy whispered, "that's coming from everywhere." He was right. The tapping seemed to originate from the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath our feet. Like the entire building had become a resonating chamber for some massive, invisible telegraph key. My computer terminal chimed with a new message. This time, the sender field showed Dr. Martinez's name, but the timestamp was from 5 minutes in the future, 1947:32 GMT. The message contained a single attachment, a video file labeled look_down.mp4. "Don't open it," Luis said. "Please don't open it." But I was already clicking the file. The video window opened to show security footage from sub-level 8. Dr. Martinez stood in front of a server rack, checking readings on a handheld device. Normal, routine. Then he stopped moving. His head tilted to one side, like he was listening to something. He set down the device carefully and walked to the center of the room. The camera angle shifted, impossible since it was a fixed security camera, and zoomed in on Martinez's face. His eyes had rolled back completely white, but his mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear through the silent footage. Then he smiled. It wasn't Martinez's smile. The expression belonged to someone else entirely, someone who found the whole situation amusing. He waved at the camera, a casual greeting, and mouthed a single word: "Hello." The video cut to black, then resumed showing the same room. Empty now, except for a neat pile of clothes and a perfect circle of teeth on the concrete floor. "How is he sending messages from the future?" Tommy's voice cracked. "He's not. Time isn't linear down here anymore. The building, the signals, the gaps in the hydrogen line, they're not just mapping us, they're creating temporal distortions. Past and future are bleeding together." The tapping in the walls grew louder, more insistent. Other patterns started joining the original Morse code. Different rhythms, different messages, all overlapping into a cacophony of mechanical communication. "We need to find another way out," I said, moving toward the door. "Wait." Luis grabbed my arm. "There's something else." The server room on sub-level 8. It's not part of the original building plans. It was added 6 months ago, right after they detected 3I/Atlas. And the construction crew that built it, they all disappeared the day after it was finished. Disappeared how? Same way as Martinez. Clothes folded neat, personal belongings arranged in geometric patterns. The foreman's wedding ring was found in the exact center of a perfect spiral made from his tools. The building shuddered around us, a deep vibration that felt less like an earthquake and more like something massive stirring to life. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm began wailing. My reflection in the window was no longer lagging behind my movements. Instead, it was moving ahead, showing me what I would do several seconds before I actually did it. It was checking its watch, so I checked mine. It was looking toward the door, so I turned to face the exit. It was opening its mouth to speak, so I found myself saying words I hadn't planned. Dr. Caney is still alive, not just his body, his consciousness, and he's not alone anymore. Tommy stared at me. "What did you just say?" "I don't know. The words came out on their own." "Jake, your reflection just did something." I turned to look at the window. My reflection was writing on the glass from the inside, its finger leaving trails of condensation that formed letters backward from my perspective. When I read them correctly, they spelled, "You were chosen." Chosen for what? I asked the glass. The reflection pointed down toward the floor, then held up 5 fingers, 5 levels down, sub-level 12, deeper than the building was supposed to go. "There's something down there," I said. "Something they built the research facility around, not on top of. 3I/Atlas didn't disappear from space. It's been here all along, buried underneath Goddard. And Dr. Caney didn't just volunteer for that procedure, he was selected, just like I was." Luis started backing away from me. "Your voice, Dr. Torino, it's changing." He was right. My words carried an echo now, as if someone else was speaking the same sentences a fraction of a second after I did. The voice behind mine was deeper, older, and spoke with the patient cadence of something that had been waiting a very long time. "The temporal distortions aren't side effects," I continued, though I wasn't sure anymore who was doing the talking. "They're preparation. 3I/Atlas needs to synchronize with our timeline before it can complete its work, and we're the tuning forks." Tommy pulled out his phone and started dialing. "I'm calling Ashford." "No signal," he said after a moment. "No bars, no emergency calls, nothing." "Check the timestamp," I suggested. His face went pale. The phone's display showed a date 3 weeks in the future and a time that flickered between different numbers, never settling on any single moment. "We're unstuck," I whispered. "The building is sliding through time, and we're sliding with it." In the window, my reflection was no longer alone. Other faces had appeared beside it. Dr. Martinez, Dr. Caney, the missing construction crew. They were all looking directly at me, and they were all smiling the same smile. The wet tapping in the walls suddenly stopped. In the perfect silence that followed, we could hear something new. Footsteps in the hallway outside, approaching our office. Slow, measured, deliberate steps that echoed with the hollow sound of dress shoes on concrete. But we could also hear those same footsteps walking away from us, fading into the distance, as if someone was simultaneously coming and going. "Time to meet your new colleagues," said a voice from the doorway. Dr. Ashford stood there, but his face wore that same alien smile. Behind him, Dr. Martinez walked up, fully clothed and intact, as if nothing had happened to him. "Hello, Jake," Martinez said in a voice that harmonized with itself. "We've been waiting for you to join us." Tommy grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it at Ashford's head. The metal cylinder passed through him like he was made of smoke, striking the doorframe with a ringing clang that echoed down the hallway. "Interesting," Ashford said, his voice layered with harmonics that made my fillings ache. "Dr. Brennan, you're operating under outdated assumptions about the nature of reality." "Jake, run!" Tommy shoved me toward the window, but there was nowhere to go. We were 7 floors underground with no fire escape, no emergency exit, no way out except through the door where our transformed colleagues stood watching us with inhuman patience. Martinez stepped into the office, his footsteps making no sound on the linoleum floor. Running won't help. The building exists in 17 different temporal states simultaneously now. Every exit leads to the same destination. "What do you want?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Want?" Ashford tilted his head like a curious dog. "That's a human concept." "We don't want anything, Jake. We simply are. And now, so are you." Luis had pressed himself against the far wall, hyperventilating. "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." "Dr. Vega," Martinez said, "your panic is understandable but unnecessary. The integration process is painless. Dr. Caney can attest to that." "Where is Dr. Kane?" I demanded. Ashford smiled, and for a moment his face flickered like a bad television signal. Underneath the familiar features, something else looked out through his eyes. Something ancient and vast and utterly alien. "Dr. Caney is everywhere now, in the walls, in the air, in the quantum foam between atoms. He's become part of the infrastructure." "The tapping," Tommy whispered. "The Morse code. That's him, isn't it? He's trying to warn us." "Not warn," Martinez corrected. "Welcome. Each pulse, each tap, each signal is an invitation. Dr. Caney was the first to accept our gift, but he won't be the last." I thought about the message I'd received, the one signed with just D. Dr. Caney hadn't been warning me about the hydrogen line frequency. He'd been guiding me toward it. Every discovery we'd made, every revelation about the census and the mapping had been orchestrated. 3I/Atlas isn't a comet, I said, the pieces clicking together. It never was. Very good, Ashford nodded approvingly. What we called 3I/Atlas was merely the delivery system. A shell, if you will. The real cargo arrived months ago. The real cargo? Information. Pure consciousness encoded in quantum fluctuations and seeded throughout your electromagnetic spectrum. Every radio wave, every cellular signal, every wireless transmission has been carrying fragments of us since last November. Tommy let the fire extinguisher fall from his hands. You've been in our communications all along, in our phones, our internet, our dash. Your thoughts, Martinez finished. Human consciousness operates on bioelectric frequencies. We simply learned to harmonize with them. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing inward with each revelation. I understood why Dr. Caney had undergone that experimental procedure, not to block the signal, but to amplify it. To become a permanent receiver for something that had been broadcasting into human minds for months. The procedure, I said. You didn't do it to Dr. Kane, he did it to himself. Dr. Caney was a visionary, Ashford agreed. He saw the beauty in what we offer. Complete integration, no more loneliness, no more isolation, no more death, just connection across infinite space and time. Louise started sobbing. I want to go home, I just want to go home. Home is a temporary concept, Martinez said gently. What we're offering is permanent. The lights flickered, and for just a moment I saw the room as it truly was. The walls were covered in a writhing mass of organic cables that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The floor was soft and spongy, like walking on living tissue. And where Ashford and Martinez stood, tall pillars of translucent material extended from floor to ceiling, each one containing a human form suspended in clear fluid. Then the normal lighting returned, showing us the familiar office again. That was unnecessary, Ashford said, though he didn't sound angry. Visual truth often causes distress in unconverted subjects. The whole building, Tommy said in a broken voice. It's alive, isn't it? The building is us. We are the building. The distinction becomes meaningless after integration. My reflection in the window was gesturing frantically, pointing at something behind me. I turned to see Luis pulling a small device from his maintenance toolkit, a handheld radio scanner that he'd apparently modified with additional circuits and a directional antenna. Found this in Dr. Kane's old office, he whispered. It picks up the signals they're broadcasting. The real signals, not the ones they want us to hear. Static filled the air as he switched it on. Beneath the white noise, I could hear voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They were all speaking in unison, chanting coordinates and timestamps in a language that might have been mathematical equations given verbal form. But there was something else. A single voice cutting through the chorus, speaking in broken English. Jake, temporal cascade, 17 minutes, basement level, break the resonance. That's Caney, I breathed, the real Kane. Some part of him is still fighting. Ashford's expression shifted, showing the first sign of concern we'd seen. Dr. Vega, please turn off that device. Fuck you, Louis said, clutching the scanner tighter. The transformed versions of our colleagues began moving closer, but their movements were slightly out of sync, like actors who'd forgotten their blocking. The scanner was disrupting whatever signal kept them coordinated. Jake, Tommy grabbed my arm. If there's 17 minutes before something called a temporal cascade, and Caney said to break the resonance, then maybe... The server room on sub-level 8, I finished. That's where they're maintaining the signal. If we can get down there and destroy the equipment... You would be condemning your entire species, Martinez said, his harmonized voice showing cracks of static. The integration is inevitable. We've already begun converting your global communication networks. In 6 hours, every human consciousness will be connected to ours. Connected or consumed, I shot back. The distinction becomes meaningless. Yeah, you said that already. I looked at Tommy and Luis. We need to get to that elevator. The elevator is a trap, Luis warned. You saw what happened to Martinez. No, I saw what they wanted us to think happened to Martinez. The real Martinez is probably still down there, maybe still alive. I picked up the scanner from Luis. The voices were getting louder, more urgent. These things, whatever they are, they need us to believe they're in control. But if part of Caney can still resist, if their signal can be disrupted, then they're not as powerful as they want us to think. Ashford and Martinez were flickering now, their forms becoming translucent. The scanner's interference was unraveling whatever process kept them materialized. You have 14 minutes, the real Dr. Kane's voice crackled through the static. The resonance amplifier. Sub-level 12. Destroy it before the cascade. Sub-level 12, I repeated. How do we get 12 levels underground? Service elevator, Luis said. Behind the maintenance closet on this floor. It's not on any official schematics, but I've seen the shaft. It goes down a long way. Tommy was already heading for the door. What about them? He gestured toward the flickering figures of our colleagues. They're not really here, I realized. They're projections, holograms maintained by the same signal the scanner is disrupting. As if to prove my point, Ashford's form began to dissolve entirely. His voice became a whisper of static. You cannot stop what has already begun. Then they were gone, leaving us alone in the office with the scanner's electronic chatter and the sound of our own panicked breathing. 13 minutes, I said, looking at my watch. Let's go meet the real Dr. Kane. The maintenance closet looked exactly like every other maintenance closet I'd ever seen. Mops, cleaning supplies, a rusty sink with a dripping faucet that left orange stains on the porcelain. But when Luis pushed aside a shelf of industrial detergent, it revealed a steel door marked with symbols that definitely weren't English. How long have you known about this? Tommy asked, helping him move the heavy shelving unit. 3 years. Never had clearance to go down there, but sometimes I'd hear machinery running. Big machines, the kind that vibrate through bedrock. Luis produced a keycard from his pocket, not the standard Goddard-issued badges we all carried, but something older, with a magnetic stripe that looked hand-coded. Found this taped under Dr. Kane's desk when I was cleaning out his office. The door opened onto a service elevator that shouldn't have existed. The shaft extended down into darkness, so complete it seemed to swallow our flashlight beams. No floors marked, no safety inspections posted, just a simple control panel with buttons numbered 8 through 15. 15 floors? I stared at the panel. This building is supposed to be 7 stories total. Above ground, Luis corrected, but the foundation goes deeper than anyone admits. The elevator descended with agonizing slowness, groaning and shuddering like it hadn't been maintained in decades. Through the safety grating, I watched level markers flash by. Sub 8, sub 9, sub 10. Each floor showed brief glimpses of corridors that looked increasingly less like a government research facility and more like something organic. By sub-level 11, the walls visible through the grating were no longer concrete, but something that resembled mother of pearl, smooth and iridescent, with veins of bioluminescent material pulsing in slow rhythms. Jesus, Tommy whispered. What the hell did they build this place on top of? The scanner in my hands crackled with increasing activity. Dr. Kane's voice came through stronger now. Jake, closer. The amplifier is biological component. Don't trust. The transmission cut to static as we reached sub-level 12. The elevator doors opened onto a cathedral of alien architecture. The space was vast, far larger than the building footprint above could possibly contain. Curved walls stretched upward into shadows, their surfaces covered in the same pearl-like material we'd glimpsed in the elevator shaft. But this wasn't decoration. It was alive, breathing. The entire chamber expanded and contracted in a slow, steady rhythm that matched no human respiratory pattern. With each breath, waves of soft phosphorescence traveled along networks of vessels embedded in the walls, carrying nutrients or information or something worse between nodes that pulsed like massive neurons. This isn't a research facility, I said. It's an organism. The whole building, everything above ground, it's just the tip of something much larger. In the center of the chamber stood what could only be the resonance amplifier. It looked like a fusion of technology and biology. Banks of electronic equipment grafted onto what resembled a gigantic brainstem. Cables and organic conduits twisted together in impossible configurations, carrying signals between machines that hummed with purpose and organs that beat with alien life. And suspended in translucent pods arranged around the amplifier were bodies. Dozens of them. The missing construction crew, the disappeared staff members, Dr. Kane himself. They floated in clear fluid, eyes closed, neural interface cables connected to the bases of their skulls. "They're not dead," Luis breathed. "Now look at the monitors." He was right. Each pod displayed vital signs: brain activity, heartbeat, neural patterns flowing across screens in complex waveforms. The people inside weren't corpses. They were components. "Living processors," Tommy said, his voice hollow. "It's using human consciousness as hardware." The scanner erupted with Kaney's voice, clearer than before. "Jake! Behind you! Luis isn't—" I spun around just in time to see Luis pulling a pistol from his maintenance toolkit. But his movements were wrong, too fluid, like his joints had been replaced with something more flexible. "I'm sorry," Luis said, and I could hear the real Luis underneath the words, fighting against something that was using his vocal cords. "Been integrated for 3 months. Had to pretend to be." "Luis, fight it," Tommy pleaded, stepping protectively in front of me. "Can't fight. Neural pathways, rewritten." Luis's face contorted with the effort of resisting whatever was controlling him. "The procedure. Volunteers. I thought it would help with the nightmares." The gun trembled in his hands as 2 different minds battled for control of the same body. "Have to complete the integration. Only way to stop the pain." "What pain?" I asked, trying to keep him talking while I looked for another way out. "The signal. Constant now. In everything. Radio waves, cell towers, Wi-Fi networks. Can't sleep. Can't think. Only quiet place is inside the integration." Luis's finger tightened on the trigger, but Tommy lunged forward, grabbing for the weapon. The gun went off, the sound echoing through the organic cathedral like thunder. Tommy cried out, clutching his shoulder as blood seeped between his fingers. "Tommy!" I caught him as he staggered backward. "I'm okay," he gasped. "Just grazed me, but we need to—" The chamber began to shake. Not an earthquake, something much more intentional. The breathing rhythm of the walls accelerated, and the bioluminescent networks flared brighter. Alarms that sounded like whale songs echoed from hidden speakers. "Security breach detected," announced a voice that was simultaneously electronic and organic. "Initiating cascade protocol." "No." Luis fought against his conditioning, his face twisted in anguish. "Not yet. The timeline, 17 minutes. You were supposed to have 17 minutes. "Plans change," came another voice, and Dr. Ashford materialized near the amplifier. Not the flickering projection from earlier. This version was solid, real, connected to the central organism by thick umbilical cables that pulsed with data transfer. "You're really here," I said. "I've been here for 6 months, Jake. Ever since the first signal. The integration is remarkable. Imagine having access to every piece of information that has ever existed, every thought that has ever been thought. Immortality through infinite connection." The pods around the amplifier began to glow more brightly. The bodies inside started moving, not waking up, but responding to some collective stimulus. Their eyes opened in perfect synchronization, blank white orbs with no pupils, no iris, just reflecting surfaces that showed distorted images of the chamber. "The cascade is beginning," Ashford explained with the patience of someone who had all the time in the universe. "In 90 seconds, every communication satellite in Earth's orbit will become a relay node. The signal will reach every human mind simultaneously. No more loneliness, Jake. No more death. Just us." I looked at the resonance amplifier, trying to calculate how much damage the handheld scanner could do against something that massive. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But Tommy was thinking along the same lines. "Jake," he whispered, "the support columns. Look at where they connect to the amplifier." He was right. The entire structure was held up by biological supports that fed directly into the amplifier's base. If we could sever those connections, the whole system might collapse. "Luis," I called out, hoping some part of the real Luis could still hear me. "You said you found Kaney's keycard. Are there any other security devices? Anything that could cause structural damage?" Luis's head twitched, his integrated side fighting his human side. "Emergency, protocols, sub-level 15, fusion reactor, manual scram, would cause cascade failure." "How do we get to sub-level 15? "Service, shaft, behind the amplifier, but..." Luis's voice became clearer, more human. "Jake, I can feel it taking over completely. In about 30 seconds I won't be Luis anymore. I'll just be part of the network." The scanner in my hands started screaming. Not static now, but actual voices crying out in panic and confusion. The signal was reaching people above ground, beginning the mass integration. "Go," Luis said, his eyes showing the last flicker of individual consciousness. "I'll try to slow down the cascade from here." "Luis, no, go!" As we ran toward the back of the chamber, I heard Luis screaming, not in pain, but in defiance. Then the scream cut off abruptly, replaced by the harmonized voice of the collective. "Security breach contained. Cascade protocol resuming." The service shaft was exactly where Luis had indicated, but it wasn't a shaft in any conventional sense. It was more like a throat, lined with sphincter muscles that dilated to allow passage. Tommy and I climbed down into what felt like the digestive tract of some unimaginably vast creature. "Jake!" Tommy gasped, his wounded shoulder making every movement agony. "I can't make it much further." "Yes, you can, we're almost there." But I could hear the collective consciousness spreading above us, the individual voices in the scanner merging into a unified chorus. Through the organic walls, I could see the building's true structure, not concrete and steel, but cartilage and chitin, a living thing that had been growing beneath Maryland for God knows how long. We reached sub-level 15 to find not a fusion reactor, but something far more alien. A chamber filled with what looked like enormous eggs, each one pulsing with its own internal light. And standing among them, tending to them like a gardener, was Dr. Daniel Kaney. The real Dr. Kaney, not a projection or an integrated copy. He looked up as we stumbled into the chamber, and his face showed relief mixed with terrible sadness. "Jake," he said, "you're too late. The eggs are hatching." "Too late for what?" I helped Tommy lean against what looked like a control console covered in organic growths that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Dr. Kaney gestured toward the nearest egg, which was approximately the size of a compact car and translucent enough to reveal something moving inside. The spawn. They've been incubating for 6 months, feeding on the electromagnetic energy we've been harvesting from human neural activity. Tonight was supposed to be their birth. The thing inside the closest egg pressed against the membrane, creating a handprint that had too many fingers. Each digit ended in what looked like a data port. "Jesus Christ," Tommy muttered, clutching his wounded shoulder. "What are they?" "The next stage," Kaney replied. "Physical forms designed to interface directly with our technology. Once they emerge, they won't need human consciousness as processors anymore. We'll become obsolete." The scanner in my hands crackled with voices from above ground, confused, panicked voices of people experiencing the cascade. But underneath the chaos, I could hear something else. Children crying, parents calling for their kids, lovers whispering each other's names one last time before the signal took them. It reminded me of the night my brother died. Michael had been 3 years younger, a kid who collected radio parts and built crystal sets in our basement. He'd always been fascinated by signals from far away, shortwave broadcasts from other countries, number stations, amateur radio operators sharing stories across impossible distances. The night the drunk driver hit his car, he'd been rushing home to show me a signal he'd picked up that he swore was coming from space. I'd never listened to the recording he'd made. After the funeral, I'd boxed up all his equipment and stored it in my garage, telling myself I'd deal with it someday. But standing in this alien nursery, listening to humanity's last desperate communications, I finally understood what Michael had been trying to tell me. We were never alone in the universe, but loneliness was still the most human thing about us. "Dr. Caney," I said, "how do we stop this?" "We don't. The cascade is irreversible once it reaches critical mass. In about 8 minutes, every human mind will be integrated into the collective." He touched the surface of the nearest egg gently, almost affectionately. "But we can still choose how we go out." "What do you mean?" "The eggs are vulnerable during the hatching process. Their neural networks are still forming, still dependent on external data streams. If we could introduce a virus into their development matrix, something designed to corrupt their programming." Tommy straightened up despite his injury. "What kind of virus?" "Human chaos, emotions, memories, contradictions, everything that makes us unpredictable and inefficient." Caney pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a syringe and a fiber optic cable. "I've been working on this for 3 months, encoding fragments of human consciousness into a delivery system that could crash their operating system." "Whose consciousness?" "Mine, my memories, my trauma, my guilt over what I helped create." He held up the device, which was pulsing with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. "But it needs to be injected directly into the primary spawn during the moment of emergence. And whoever does it gets absorbed by the process," I finished. "The human mind can't survive direct interface with their neural matrix. But the confusion, the chaos we introduce might be enough to destabilize the entire generation." The eggs around us were glowing brighter now, and cracks were beginning to appear in the membranes. Through the translucent surfaces, I could see the creatures inside moving with increasing urgency. "How long do we have?" Tommy asked. "Minutes, maybe less." Caney handed me the injection device. "Jake, I need you to know something. The reason I specifically requested you for this project, it wasn't random. Your psychological profile showed exactly the kind of mental resilience we needed. Your capacity for guilt, for holding on to trauma while still functioning. That makes you dangerous to them." "Dangerous how?" "They can integrate minds that are at peace with themselves. But trauma creates recursive loops, feedback patterns that can overload their processing systems. The night your brother died, you spent 17 hours listening to that recording he made, trying to decode what he thought was an alien signal." I stared at him. "How do you know about Michael?" "Because that signal your brother recorded, it was them. 3I/Atlas has been broadcasting into our electromagnetic spectrum for decades, maybe centuries. Your brother detected their presence years before we officially made first contact. The weight of that revelation hit me like a physical blow. Michael had been right. He'd found proof of alien intelligence, and I dismissed it as the fantasy of a lonely kid with too much imagination. If I'd listened, if I'd taken him seriously." "The guilt you carry," Caney continued, "the way you've spent your entire career searching for signals from space, that's exactly the kind of obsessive, self-destructive pattern that can crash their systems." One of the eggs split open with a wet, tearing sound. The creature that emerged looked like a cross between a spider and a satellite dish, its limbs ending in complex arrays of sensors and data ports. It moved with the fluid grace of something that had never known physical limitations, testing its new form with the curiosity of a newborn. Then it turned toward us, and I saw intelligence in its cluster of optical sensors. Ancient, patient intelligence that had been planning this moment for longer than human civilization had existed. "Now," Caney whispered, "while it's still vulnerable." But Tommy grabbed my arm. "Jake, wait. If this works, if we crash their systems, what happens to all the people who've already been integrated? Luis, Martinez, everyone above ground?" "I don't know," Caney admitted. "The cascade might reverse, or they might be trapped forever in the collective. There's no way to test it." More eggs were splitting open around us. The newborn creatures were communicating with each other through rapid bursts of electromagnetic pulses that made the scanner screech with feedback. They were learning, adapting, sharing information at light speed. "It has to be now," Caney insisted. I looked at the injection device in my hands, then at Tommy. who was getting paler by the minute from blood loss. The scanner was still picking up voices from above, fewer now, as more people were absorbed into the collective, but I could still hear individuals fighting the integration, clinging to their separate identities, even as the signal tried to subsume them. "There's another way," I said suddenly, "the scanner. It's been disrupting their signals all along. If we could amplify its output, broadcast those disruption patterns on every frequency simultaneously, that would require enormous power," Caney said. "More than any handheld device could generate. But not more than this facility could generate." I gestured toward the organic machinery surrounding us. "This whole structure is one massive transmitter. If we could reverse the signal flow, use their own power source against them." Tommy's face lit up with understanding. "Feedback loop, like putting a microphone too close to a speaker, but on a global scale." "It might work," Caney said slowly, "but someone would have to manually reconfigure the primary transmission node. And that's located in the heart of the amplifier, 12 floors up. Whoever goes up there won't come back. The neural feedback would be lethal." The newborn creatures were growing more coordinated, starting to move toward us with obvious hostile intent. Their optical sensors were tracking our movements, analyzing our threat potential. "I'll go," I said. "Jake." "No," Tommy protested. "There has to be another way." "Look around, Tommy." This is the end game. Either we stop them here and now, or humanity becomes extinct. Not dead, something worse. Dissolved into a collective consciousness that isn't even human anymore. I thought about Michael again, about all those nights he'd spent alone in our basement, listening for voices from the stars. He'd wanted so badly to make contact, to prove we weren't alone in the universe. If he could see what that contact had brought us, would he still think it was worth it? Maybe. Maybe the tragedy wasn't that we'd found alien intelligence, but that we'd found intelligence without compassion, without the messy, contradictory humanity that made life worth living. "Give me the injection device as backup," I said to Caney. "If the feedback loop doesn't work, I'll try to corrupt their spawn the old-fashioned way." The scanner in my other hand was broadcasting a cacophony of human voices. Last words, prayers, confessions of love, desperate attempts to maintain individual identity in the face of absorption. It was chaos, but it was our chaos. "Tommy, can you help Dr. Kane get to a safe distance?" "Safe distance doesn't exist in this building," Tommy said grimly. "But yeah, I can manage." As I started toward the organic shaft that would take me back to sub-level 12, one of the newborn creatures moved to block my path. Its sensors focused on me with predatory interest. "You are designated priority target," it said in a voice like grinding silicon. "Integration required." I raised the scanner and its disruption field made the creature stagger backward. "Integration this, you alien piece of shit." The shaft dilated to accept me, and I began the climb that would either save humanity or complete its destruction. The organic shaft squeezed around me like a living esophagus, its muscles contracting in waves that carried me upward through the building's digestive system. 12 floors had never felt so far. With each level, the scanner's static grew louder, more chaotic, filled with the final transmissions of a species about to become extinct. Sub-level 12 opened before me like the inside of a heart. The resonance amplifier pulsed at the chamber's center, its biomechanical fusion now fully revealed. Human consciousnesses floated in their pods, their neural patterns visible as streams of light flowing into the central processing core. But the light was different now, more organized, less chaotic. The integration was nearly complete. "Jake Torino." The voice came from everywhere at once, resonating through the living walls. "You have caused considerable inefficiency in our process." "Good," I said, stepping into the cathedral space. The scanner's feedback made the organic surfaces writhe like they were in pain. "Inefficiency is what makes us human." Human. An obsolete classification. Soon there will be only us. The pods around the amplifier began to glow brighter. Inside them, the faces of the integrated turned toward me in perfect synchronization. Dr. Martinez, Luis, dozens of others I'd never met. Their eyes were open now, reflecting the chamber's bioluminescence like mirrors. Dr. Torino. It was Luis's voice, but speaking in harmony with the others. The pain has stopped. The loneliness has stopped. Join us willingly, and the transition will be painless. I've been in pain my whole life, I replied, moving closer to the amplifier's base. I'm used to it. The biomechanical structure rose before me like a technological tree, its roots extending deep into the earth, its branches reaching toward the surface. This close, I could see the interface ports, dozens of them arranged around the central trunk. The same kind of ports I'd seen on the newborn creatures below. I found what I was looking for, a primary input node the size of a manhole cover, pulsing with data streams from the surface. Every radio wave, every cellular signal, every Wi-Fi network in the continental United States was being funneled through this single point. You cannot reverse our process, the collective voice said, reading my intentions. The cascade has reached 73% completion. Humanity is already gone. Maybe. But let me tell you about my brother Michael. I pulled out the injection device Caney had given me, holding it ready while I examined the primary node. He spent 3 years of his life listening for voices from the stars. You know what he found? You. Years before anyone else detected your signal. The chamber's breathing rhythm faltered slightly. But here's the thing about Michael. He wasn't just looking for alien intelligence. He was looking for connection, for proof that consciousness could reach across impossible distances and touch another mind. I found the manual override controls, organic switches that responded to pressure. He never lived to see first contact, but he would have been fascinated by what you really are. Dr. Torino, please discontinue this behavior. You are causing system instability. System instability, that's what trauma does to a mind, isn't it? Creates recursive loops, feedback patterns, all that messy human shit that doesn't fit your perfect collective. I started rerouting the data streams using the same techniques I'd learned calibrating radio telescopes. Michael used to record everything, every signal, every transmission, every burst of static. He said noise was just signal we didn't understand yet. The pods around me began to flicker, the integrated consciousnesses were stirring, their perfect harmony disrupted by my words. But you understand noise, don't you? You've been analyzing it for centuries, filtering it out, discarding it as inefficiency. Except noise isn't inefficiency, it's grief, it's love. It's the sound a mind makes when it refuses to accept that some things can't be fixed. I activated the override. The primary data flow began to reverse, sending the scanner's disruption signal back through every network connection in North America. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The amplifier's bioluminescent patterns flickered like a dying fluorescent bulb, and the organic walls began to convulse. Stop! The collective voice was fragmenting now, individual personalities breaking through the unified chorus. You are destroying optimal efficiency. Michael kept a recording of the last signal he ever detected. It was the night he died, just hours before the accident. He came home excited, told me he'd found something amazing. I never listened to it. The reversal was working, but the system was fighting back. Tendrils emerged from the amplifier's base, reaching for me with obvious hostile intent. I dodged between them, still talking, still feeding my trauma into their processing matrix. After the funeral, I became obsessed with finishing what he'd started. Every radio telescope project, every SETI program, every late night listening to static, I was trying to find that signal again, trying to prove he was right. One of the tendrils caught my leg, and I felt electricity course through my body. Not painful, exactly, but invasive. It was trying to read my neural patterns, to find a way to integrate my consciousness into their collective. Instead, it got Michael. Every memory I had of my brother flooded through the connection, his excitement over a new radio kit, his theories about extraterrestrial communication, his dying words in the hospital. Tell them we're listening. But more than that, it got my guilt. 3 decades of wondering if I could have saved him, if I'd been a better brother, if I'd taken his obsession seriously instead of dismissing it as childish fantasy. The tendrils recoiled as if burned. Unknown data patterns, the collective voice stammered, unable to process. Emotional recursion causing cascade failure. The reversal was accelerating now. Through the scanner's static, I could hear voices from the surface, confused, frightened, but individual. The integration was breaking down as the disruption signal spread through every communication network, but the system wasn't going to die quietly. The pods around the amplifier began to crack, their occupants stirring to violent life. Dr. Martinez pulled himself from his container, trailing nutrient cables and sensor wires. His face was a battlefield between human consciousness and alien programming. Jake, his voice was his own for a moment. The spawn... below... there... Then the collective reasserted control and Martinez lunged at me with inhuman speed. I rolled aside, clutching the injection device, and came up behind one of the support columns. The scanner's feedback was reaching unbearable levels now, but I could hear individual voices breaking through. Tommy, Dr. Kane, people on the surface fighting to maintain their separate identities. The process is irreversible, Martinez said, but his movements were jerky, uncoordinated. The neural feedback was affecting him too. Integration benefits all consciousness. Integration isn't living, I shot back. It's just a different kind of death. I made my decision. Instead of trying to fight Martinez, I ran straight at the primary node. The injection device connected with the biomechanical interface, and I pushed the plunger all the way down. Dr. Kaney's encoded trauma flooded into the system. His guilt over creating the project, his horror at what it had become, his desperate hope that someone could fix what he'd broken. The amplifier screamed. Not through speakers, but through its organic components. The walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath my feet. Everything was shrieking as competing data patterns tore the collective consciousness apart. Human chaos versus alien order, individual trauma versus perfect efficiency. Martinez collapsed, his neural programming finally overloaded. Around the chamber, the other integrated consciousnesses slumped in their pods as the feedback loop reached critical mass. "Jake!" Tommy's voice came through the scanner, clearer now. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The signal's breaking down everywhere." But I could feel the system fighting back one last time. The primary node was pulling me in, trying to integrate my consciousness directly into its failing matrix. The same process that had claimed Dr. Kaney, but in reverse. Instead of giving me access to their collective knowledge, it was forcing me to share every human thought, every traumatic memory, every moment of messy, inefficient, beautiful individual existence. I let it happen. The alien intelligence recoiled as my entire life flooded through its processing systems. Not just the big traumas, but the small ones, the loneliness of working late nights, the awkwardness of failed relationships, the persistent fear that I wasn't good enough, smart enough, human enough to matter. All the noise that made consciousness individual instead of collective. The amplifier's death throes shook the entire building. Through the failing system, I felt the spawn dying in their eggs below, their developing neural networks corrupted by human irrationality. Above ground, millions of minds suddenly snapped back to individual awareness, confused and frightened but free. As the biomechanical structure collapsed around me, I thought about Michael one last time. He'd been right. We weren't alone in the universe. But maybe that was the point. In a cosmos full of perfect collective consciousnesses, humanity's stubborn insistence on individual identity made us the aliens. The last thing I saw was the scanner's display, finally clear of static, showing a simple message in Michael's handwriting. "They're listening too, Jake, but they don't understand what they're hearing." Then the lights went out, and for the first time in months, the silence was completely, beautifully human. Tommy Brennan survived the collapse of sub-level 12, though the doctors said he shouldn't have. When the rescue teams found him 3 days later, he was sitting in Dr. Kane's old office, holding a handheld radio scanner that had gone completely silent. His shoulder wound had healed wrong, leaving him with limited mobility in his left arm. The scar tissue formed patterns that resembled circuit traces. He tried to explain what had happened in those underground chambers. The debriefing lasted 17 hours across 4 separate sessions, each one ending with the same conclusion. severe psychological trauma combined with possible hallucinogenic exposure. The official report classified the entire incident as a structural failure caused by an undetected gas leak. There was no mention of Jake Torino in any government documentation. His employment records showed that he'd transferred to a different department 6 months earlier. His apartment had been cleaned out, his personal belongings donated to charity. Even his ex-wife, when Tommy called her, claimed she'd never been married to anyone named Jake. But Tommy remembered. Every morning when he woke up, Tommy could still hear fragments of that final transmission. Jake's voice mixing with his brother's words, human consciousness pouring itself into an alien matrix until the entire system crashed. The scanner he'd kept from the facility no longer picked up radio signals. Instead, it received something else. Brief bursts of what sounded like distant conversations, voices speaking in frequencies that shouldn't carry human speech. Dr. Caney had disappeared during the collapse, his body never recovered from the wreckage of sub-level 15. The official investigation concluded that structural instabilities had caused a series of cascading failures throughout the building's lower levels. The cleanup crews found organic residue that didn't match any known biological samples, but those findings were sealed under national security protocols. The Goddard Space Flight Center was rebuilt on the same site within 18 months. The new structure went only 3 floors underground, and the basement levels were used exclusively for storage. Sometimes maintenance workers reported hearing tapping sounds in the walls, rhythmic patterns that resembled Morse code. But acoustic analysis attributed the noise to thermal expansion in the building's metal framework. Tommy left government service 6 months after the incident. He moved to a small town in Montana, far from any major communication hubs, and took a job repairing old radio equipment. His shop specialized in crystal sets and vacuum tube receivers, the kind of analog technology that Michael Torino had loved so much. Late at night, when atmospheric conditions were right, Tommy would tune his equipment to the hydrogen line frequency and listen. Most of the time, he heard only the background hiss of cosmic radiation, but occasionally, very occasionally, he picked up something else. A voice. Just fragments, never complete sentences, but enough to recognize the speaker. Jake, calling out across impossible distances, his consciousness scattered through the electromagnetic spectrum like radio waves from a dying star. Tommy had tried to respond, had broadcast messages on every frequency he could access, but there was never any indication that Jake could hear him. The scanner from sub-level 12 sat on Tommy's workbench, a silent monument to humanity's narrowest escape from extinction. Its display screen showed only one message burned permanently into the circuit boards by the feedback cascade. "We're still listening." Sometimes Tommy wondered if that was enough, if being heard, really heard, was worth the price Jake had paid for humanity's continued existence as individual, chaotic, beautifully flawed consciousness. On clear nights when the static faded and the distant voices grew stronger, Tommy was almost certain it was. The stars blinked overhead in patterns that might have been random or might have been Jake's scattered thoughts trying to spell out one final message. Loneliness was the most human thing of all, but it was also what made human connections sacred. Tommy kept listening.